בוקר טוב, שבוע טוב. This is the second installment about Rav Soloveitchik. Last week we spoke about his birth and up to the year 1932. In 1932, two major events in the life of Rav Soloveitchik, and that is that he comes to the shores of the United States of America, and second is that he receives his PhD, his diploma, from the Berlin University in absentia, because he's already in the United States, but it's being rectified by the university. And we spoke last week about his origins, about the importance of the royalty of family Soloveitchik, and that he was primarily homeschooled by his father. And we spoke about maybe what we would see as unique methods of instructing by his father, by his family. And he's obviously a genius, he's a Gaon, and but he does also get some push towards secular education by his mother, who comes from a more somewhat of an open family, we may say. And he goes to university in Warsaw and later university in Berlin. And as I said, in 1932, following his father, the footsteps of his father, who came 3 years earlier, of Moshe Soloveitchik 3 years earlier, came to the United States. And Yosef Dov and his wife, Tonya, are landing on the shores of the United States in 1932. Now, you suppose the way that he came in, you have to remember that in the 30s, it's not so easy anymore to come to the United States. There were quotas on the number of immigrants, and it was the Americans had several reasons why they decided to put a break on the immigration. And part of it was in order to stop Catholics from coming in. It was not necessarily anti-Jewish, but stopping the Jews from coming in was considered, you may say, a side bonus. So many Jews were not able to come to the United States, even when it became very difficult in Europe. In 1932, that's people with a sense of smell, you may say, were already beginning to understand that something bad is shaping. Now, not necessarily that people understood what is really coming ahead, but many people knew that it would be a wise decision to move on from Europe. But it was very difficult. The way for clergymen to come in was if you are being given an invitation from an existing institution, a religious institution, to come and teach or to preach or to become a rabbi, then you would be given a green card and would be allowed to come into and later citizenship in the United States. That's the way that the system was set up. So Rav Joseph B Soloveitchik's father, Rav Moshe, was very active at these years. He secured a position for his son not in Yeshiva University, where it seems that there was not an ability to hire him, but he spoke with the Hebrew Theological College in Chicago. It's nowadays known better as the Skokie Yeshiva. So that's a very old institution. It's more than 100 years old institution. And they invited Rav Yosef Dov to come and be a teacher. However, immediately after he filled the forms in, I guess, in Ellis Island, I don't know, wherever he landed, I don't know where, after he filled the forms, they notified him that on a second consideration, they do not have the funds required in order to hire him. Now, I guess that nowadays they would put him on a plane and throw him back. But back then, if you were already in, then they let you stay. But the problem was that he had no money, he had no ways to sustain himself. And, that's before all the national security and all the security nets. That was the time of pure capitalism. You either float or you die. And if you die, then that's it's your problem. It's not the state problem. That's how things were. I think people here are familiar with this view. So he had to find a job. And uh, again, his father is able to secure for him a position as a Rav, this time not as a teacher, but as a Rav in Boston. And that is a position that he would hold throughout a whole of his life. So a Rav in Boston. Now, who exactly hires a Rav for Boston? That's not the state of Israel. Right? You don't have a Rav. The government would not pay for a Rav for the city. So what does it mean even to speak about a Rav for Boston? That's not a simple question. I mean, who is the Rav of New York at the time? It's not so simple to speak about a Rav of a city. Now, in Boston, they had some type of a federation, you may want to call it. It was called Vaad Ha'ir or Chevre Shas. I delved a little into these questions of politics, and I decided to stop reading because I saw that it doesn't lead anywhere. I don't think it leads anywhere. But there were different manipulations being pulled, you may say, and strings that had to be moved in order for this position to be created. Let that be suffice. And I would imagine that if you do someone lesser than Rav Joseph B. Soloveitchik, the position would have just disappear, vanish a year or two later. But because the force of his personality, it created such a position. Yes, thank you. Centro is the Rav. Yeah. So in certain places, the shuls were united enough in order to create this type of, again, of a federation for the Orthodox shuls and invite a Rav and pay for him. I mean, all of these require, of course, people not only to speak, but to buy into. But it was extremely difficult at these days, at those days. And also, I think to this day, I don't know, again, is there a former chief rabbi to New York? Can you even imagine that they would be able to put all of the Orthodox, I do not speak about other dominations, only the Orthodox, but all the different stripes of Orthodox into one federation to choose one chief rabbi to New York? Can you even imagine such a thing? You know, the Satmar and the Chabad, and it's
And it's not the rabbanut of the city.
It's not formal. I mean, it's not the mayor of Boston would not care about me unless the Rav would gather such a political importance that the mayor would have a reason why to speak with him. But it's not any formal position. You know, in the United States, the law ban, if I understand correctly, then the government is not allowed to hire clergymen, and that would be establishing a religion. That's not allowed according to their institution, according to their constitution. If I understand it correctly, of course, I'm very far from being any expert in the field, but that's my notion at least. Okay, so he comes to Boston, and as you can imagine, the gap between Lithuania and the heart of Torah kingdom where he sat and what he meets in Boston is huge. And he would tell many years later, the students say that he would, from time to time, when he would want to light the shiur up a little, then he would tell stories from his first days in Boston. And he would describe how he would come to officiate in a wedding and Mesader Kiddushin. And he would ask the Chatan, are you a Kohen? Are you a Levi? The Chatan would have no idea what he speaks about. What does it mean, a Kohen? Or he would speak about the president of a shul that during the time of Kriyat Megillah in Purim, he would sit with the New York Times and read the financial section. So that was the type of Yahadut, right, if that can be called so, that he met there. But on the other hand, we shouldn't be also too dismissive. I mean, these are people that kept to their Jewish identity, even if not very halachically, but they paid high prices for their will and wish to cling to this identity. So again, of course, we want to improve. We want to better ourselves, to enhance our Jewish practice. But nonetheless, also we can appreciate what those people with all the deficiencies that have been there, and there have been deficiencies, what they still were able to keep. Okay, so in the beginning, he's acting as a Rav, meaning to say he was very involved in kashrut in Boston. He ate a lot of maror from his first dipping into this area, because you understand that's questions of money. These are questions of butchers and others that were strongly already fortified into their position, and suddenly this young, right, in his 30s, young Rav comes in and he wants to put a higher standards, but there are different Rabbanim running around, and again, no one is owing him anything. So there is no formal system in which he is now the Rav of the city, so his decisions are obligating in any way. They are not. People that wants to, it's America, it's a free country. People that want to abide would abide. People that want to write kosher on their store, and really it's kosher style, kosher in the name, kosher in the picture, kosher according to the Rav from the other side of the street. Everything is allowed. It's a free country. So it was very difficult for him, again, coming from, of course, in Berlin, he met with Jews that were not observant. That was not new to him. But the complete hefkerut that was going in America, that was something that was new. In Germany, there were free, meaning not observant Jews. But Germany of course, Germany even more before the war. That's a very hierarchical system. So there was a Jewish community. The Jewish community was acknowledged by the government as the formal Jewish community. And they had certain responsibilities and they had certain privileges over the Jews, that at least those Jews that were assigned under the community. So there was some hierarchical system of who can give kosher. Now you can be maybe not happy with the certain Rav that would give the hechsher, but there was an address. But in America, there is no address. Everyone does whatever he pleases. Ish ayashar be'einav yaseh. So it was very difficult, and he got into some fights with local Rabbanim that were not up to the standards that he wanted to uphold in Boston. I think that at least in these first few years, he was not very happy with his position. And there is a simple proof. In 1935, he is doing his first and last trip to Eretz Israel. What does he look for in Eretz Israel? So there was the election for the position of the chief rabbi of Tel Aviv. And he came to Eretz Israel in order to make a tour and basically to run a campaign, hoping to be elected as the chief rabbi of Tel Aviv. That's in 1935. And he's supported by his father, so we understand from that his father also thinks that he would do better in Tel Aviv as the chief rabbi than what is going on in Boston. Now again, the chief rabbi of Tel Aviv, under the British mandate, have much more authority than the Rav of Boston, right, under the American Constitution, because of this difference. To this day, the United Synagogue is an acknowledged body by the British government, and as such, it has certain privileges, certain rights. There is no such a thing in the American system. So having a formal rabbi, being a formal rabbi under the British mandate, would give you certain authorities by which you can practice and become a rabbi whose rulings has a meaning. Now again, it doesn't mean that we return to the days of the Sanhedrin. The British would not allow the Rav to hit someone, right, or to kill someone because he violated the Shabbat. But on kashrut, on other areas, Gittin, Kiddushin, then the British law gave the Rabbanut the authority over divorce and marriage. So he tried to run for the chief rabbinate of Tel Aviv. And we have a beautiful description. He came to Eretz Israel and he went obviously to Yerushalayim. And he was able to meet there with Rav Kook. It was just a couple of months before Rav Kook was niftar. And he went in. Unfortunately, at least to my knowledge, we do not have any recording of what these two giants spoke together. However, even just the meeting itself, of course, is very thought-provoking, what could have been said. And then he gave a shiur. Rav Kook has established a yeshiva in Yerushalayim, we spoke about Rav Kook, called Yeshiva HaMerkazit HaOlamit, right? The world central yeshiva. Now, of course, that was more in the vision than in practice, but nowadays, to this day, it's called Yeshivat Merkaz Harav. Now it's called Merkaz Harav after Rav Kook, but during his lifetime, it's called the Yeshiva Merkazit HaOlamit. And Rav Soloveitchik goes in and gives a shiur. And there are people in the yeshiva who learned in Volozhin, who remembered his father, who remembered his grandfather, and they remember the Natziv, and they come in to hear the descendant of these great people that they were students of, and people from all of Yerushalayim, Haredi, Nanchar, coming in, because he's speaking to everyone. Again, that's royal family coming into Yerushalayim to give a shiur. So there is a description. Please, you can spread over the sheets. That is in source Aleph. So this is an account that was written by Rav Neria, about whom we would have to speak Be'ezrat Hashem in a future shiur. And Rav Neria, who later went on, he was a student of Rav Kook, a student in Merkaz, and later went on to establish the first yeshiva tichonit in Eretz Israel, which is Kfar HaRoeh. So that's Rav Neria, and he was nicknamed the Avi Dor HaKippot HaSrugot, right? The father of the generation of Kippah Sruga. That was his importance. So he would, Be'ezrat Hashem, would also be discussed. And he wrote an account of this shiur that was given by Rav Soloveitchik in 1935. He was a young man, very young man, but he participated in the shiur. And I found the account, I couldn't reach the original, but I found the account as it was written or translated by Rav Aaron Rakefet in his short biography of Rav Soloveitchik. So look here, it's a beautiful description. נתכנסו ובאו לאולם ישיבת מרכז הרב זקני הדור. So to the hall in the Merkaz Harav Yeshiva came the elders of generation. נאמני היכל התורה אשר בוולוז'ין. Right? The graduates, the faithful to the היכל התורה, to the Torah hall in Volozhin. הזקנים אשר ראו אותו בתפארתו. So the old people that still saw the Volozhin Yeshiva when it was still standing. צעירי התורה מישיבת עץ החיים הוותיקה. ישיבת חברון המחודשת. So from Hebron, the more Haredi side, עץ חיים, also the ירושלמי Haredi side. תלמידי הון של הנציב העליון הרב נפתלי צבי יהודה ברלין. לראות היעמדו דברי הנכד הבריסקאי, כי הגידו להם אשר הוא עילוי. Of course, that's a reference or a paraphrase on Megillat Esther. right? יעמדו דברי מרדכי, כי הגיד להם אשר הוא יהודי. With the words of Mordechai stands, as he told them he's a Jew. So here, with the words of the Brisker stand, because he told them that he's an עילוי. והנה זה הקהל, so people are moving, בפתח הופיע ראש הישיבה, הגרים חרל"פ איש ירושלים, so רב חרל"פ, and after him entered אברך, so a young looking man, again, he's in his 30s, וגבה קומה, tall, גבה מצח, so he has a high brow, I guess, high forehead, שחור זקן ושחור עיניים, still very young, and with a black beard, and black eyes, עבר זקופות בין הקהל הצפוף של תלמידי החכמים כשהוא מאוהר ומכונס בעצמו. So that's a beautiful description. It says he was going through all of this crowd, but he was not looking at the crowd. You could see that he is gathered into himself and is thinking the shiur that he is going to give. ראש הישיבה הקדים דברי ברכה קצרים לאורח, ומסבר לו את רשות הדיבור, והנה עלהו הבימתה. So רב חרל"פ gave a short remarks of introduction, and then Rav Soloveitchik goes up. כן, אף הוא יודע היטיב הנימים המקשרות אותו אל קהל שומעיו, לא זכותי הביא זאת, כי עם זכות אבותיי הקדושים. So he says, Rav Soloveitchik knew that he should open not with his own merit. I am X and I came here because I want to be the... No. He begins with, he says, I know that I'm standing here because of the merit of my holy fathers. And מיד עבר לעצם השיעור, then began the learning itself, ברחבות, בביטחון, so in a wide scope, and with security, although he was young, and the people standing in front of him, sitting in front of him, were older than he was. Still he felt, he said he was speaking with such a confidence, בביטחון. he התחיל את קשיותיו על הגמרא ועל הרמב"ם בשפת הישיבות, בטרמינולוגיה הרב חיימית, בשפה הכובשת מיד את היגיון שכל. he spoke, he says, in the jargon, in the yeshiva jargon. Now you can understand that people here are from different places in the world, right? Some were born in Jerusalem, some were born in Europe, in different places in Europe. I guess the shiur was given in Yiddish. It doesn't say, but truth is, I don't know. Maybe he was speaking in Hebrew, but it's hard for me to believe. I would believe that he spoke in Yiddish. 95% of the people that would sit in the yeshiva would know Yiddish. So I would imagine that's the language that he was speaking in. But even Yiddish, I have very little knowledge in Yiddish, but I know that there is a big difference between the Lithuanian Yiddish that he was speaking and the Polish Yiddish that, or the Romanian Yiddish I do not speak even, that my parents were speaking. All right, so it's not a completely different language, but it's not so always easy to transfer and to understand. But he spoke in the yeshivish jargon. That's what he says here, in the terminology of Reb Chaim of Brisk. So there was immediately a common ground that everyone was able to stand on, and it conquered their logic. כובשת את היגיון שכלנו. על אחת ההגדרות הוסיף המרצה האורח והעיר, דומה ששמעתי את זה מפי הסבא. So at least once, about one of the definitions, the foundations that he was teaching, he said, I think I heard it from my grandfather, from Reb Chaim. That was enough, of course, for everyone immediately to fall in silence. No, that's like someone say, I was in Har Sinai. We have to understand that the figure of Reb Chaim Brisk in the yeshivot world, that was very majestic-like. It's very difficult for me to explain it. Even nowadays, I mean, we are already 100 years later, but still, when you say that something was said by Reb Chaim, you don't have to agree with it, but you cannot ignore it. כן, דומה שגם אנו שומעים את הדברים מפי הסבא. So Rav Neria says, we also felt that Reb Chaim is standing here and giving a shiur. אחרי מחרוזת הקושיות בא כאמור הניתוח ההגיוני והבריא ישר. So that's a classic shiur. It begins with a chain of questions, קשיא, and then there is the logical analysis. הניתוח ההגיוני, הבריא, הישר. So it's logical, it makes sense, it's sound. נחשפו הדברים מפנימיותם. Things were, the inner mechanics of הלכה was exposed, was explained, בהסברה ברורה ומחוברת, in clear explanation. ראינו כיצד בזו אחר זו הן מתיישבות ומתורצות. יותר משעה וחצי ערך השיעור. The shiur was more than an hour and a half. Now, in the yeshiva in YU, the Rav would sometimes give a shiur that was more than 3 hours. So I guess he had mercy on them. He gave them only an hour and a half. שרקתק אליו את כל שומעיו, אכן בית הלוי לא יכזה, because in בית הלוי, because, of course, Rav Joseph B Soloveitchik is named after his great grandfather, Rav Yosef B Soloveitchik, the father of Reb Chaim, who authored the Beit HaLevi. So, again, Rav Neria says, we saw in front of our eyes the whole tradition of Brisk, the whole chain from the Beit HaLevi to Rav Yosef B Soloveitchik. And as we remember, Rav Soloveitchik himself, that was the way, you remember that he was learning. He was always feeling that the people that he speaks about are present in the room. So that's how he is also giving this experience. Okay, so that's beautiful. Everything is great. The only problem is that Rav Soloveitchik didn't have the right political maneuver in order to cause the political body that was electing the Rav of Tel Aviv to choose him. Because he was not part of the Mizrachi. We may remember and think about him as the head, as he was, the president of the Mizrachi in the United States, and one of the most important Zionist Jewish thinkers to ever emerge. And of course that is completely correct, but it is still 10 years into the future. And at this point, he is basically he's part of the Aguda. And he's coming from the Soloveitchik family, which is known for their opposition to Zionism. Now, it may be that he himself was obviously now not opposed. If he's coming to try and be elected, he's not opposed to Zionism. But there are others who are part of the Mizrachi, who are part of the Zionist organization. And of course, they would have much more pushing force than what Rav Soloveitchik would have, with all due respect to the support of his father and the strength and the royalty of his family. So the end result was that the man that was chosen for the Rabbinate of Tel Aviv was Rav Moshe Avigdor Amiel, very interesting person, very important Rav. And you know, it may be that for Tel Aviv he was the right person. I mean, it's very difficult to know. He was also, I think, 30 years older than Rav Soloveitchik, which is also obviously a consideration, much more experienced. And Rav Soloveitchik lost the election. And, you know, it's always interesting. In history, you are not allowed to ask the question, what if? It's not an historical question. It's difficult enough to understand what did happen. Thinking about counter history, what could have happened, that's beyond the veil. However, one cannot sometimes at least think what would have happened if Rav Soloveitchik would have been chosen as the Rav of Tel Aviv back in the mid-30s. Who knows? I mean, these are two questions. What would have happened to the Jews here in Israel, to the Orthodoxy, or to the Zionist Orthodoxy in Israel? But it's also a question, what would have happened with modern Orthodoxy in the United States? And not even say it maybe, it's for sure the hand of the Hashgacha, right, of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that decided that Rav Soloveitchik is more needed in the United States. And so he returns to the United States. They attribute to him the statement, which again I don't know. It's not written anywhere, but they say that he said after not being able to be elected that they were looking for a goat and not for a Rav. That's because some of the people that were supposed to choose, when they were interviewing him, they asked him, why don't you have a rabbinical beard? So he had, I mean, according to some of the pictures, I guess it differs in different years, but at least the picture that I sent you last week, which is a picture that they took when he landed in the United States, he did have some small beard, but not a rabbinical, full one. So it may be that, so he said that they are looking for a goat instead of looking for a Rav. Be it as it may, when he returned to the United States, he returned to Boston in 1935, and he knew that he is now here in order to stay. There would be another one episode in which he would think about coming and becoming a Rav here in Eretz Israel, but that is into the future. We would speak about that Be'ezrat Hashem either in the last minutes of this year or already in our next lecture. So, he's coming back. And he comes back to Boston. Of course, Kashrut Eruv is still engaged in everything. But he knows that if he now thinks in the long run, there is one thing that he must do immediately, and that is attend to the state of education. Now, we spoke about that already a few times, but there is no way to emphasize it. In the modern world, there is no way to keep Yahadut floating, Orthodoxy. Floating, observance floating, unless you have a good handle on the education of the children. Now, again, for single children, it may be that a kid would go to a public school, would go to another place, and then would become the greatest Rav. Because for individuals, everything is open. But when you speak about societies, then you have to create institutions. And there were not good modern institutions for education. Just there was not. They were relying on supplementary schools, what was Sunday schools or afternoon Talmudei Torah, which were not adequate to their tasks. They were underfunded. They were many times the teachers were rabbis that came from Europe, which may have been very nice people, but they have no connection with the American children that were growing up. They couldn't speak with them. Sometimes they really couldn't speak with them because of language problems, but even if they could speak, they were not speaking the language in the cultural language. And that was sorely missing. So the children basically grew up with no figures that they can identify with as people of Torah. So it was considered a great success if the child would just be externally observant to some degree. But anything more than that was a pipe dream, that someone would really become a Yodea Torah, would be able to learn a Daf Gemara. These were things that were very far beyond the conceptual reach of the parents, let alone the children. I apologize for speaking, but that's it's just a situation as it was. And again, some of them were very good people, very dedicated to what they understood from Yahadut, and paid high prices, didn't work on Shabbat. Some of them paid very high prices for keeping the tradition as they understood it. But nonetheless, it was something that it's very difficult. Maybe you have memories from Europe, right? And that's why you are willing to pay very high prices for Shabbat or for other things. But if you are raising your child and you send him to a public school, and then maybe in the afternoon, there is someone Yiddish speaking coming to him and speaks to him about concept that is extremely foreign to his world. What would happen with the child? Well, we know what happened with the children. 80% of leaving the field, that's very scary numbers. And the attempt to walk through the shuls again, and I highly appreciate shuls. I tend to work in one. But that is not the most important factor in the question, would there be a next generation? Which should be our most and foremost engagement. It's not about shuls, it's about schools. And when you understand that, you understand you have to pivot your resources to Jewish education, and not only supplementary education, and not only Sunday schools, but real day-to-day school. A day school. Now that's a huge project. And while public schools are being funded by the government, so they are basically there for free, if you want to have your private education, bevakasha, but you need to pay for it. Now we speak about people that are immigrants. They do not have large amounts of money. So that means they would have more or less, if you want to open such a school, it would be a good school, then what you would have to do is to make yourself subservient, more or less, to the cause of education. It's not only that. As an immigrant, one of the most important things for you is the ability to acculturate yourself, to assimilate, not assimilate in the sense of outmarrying, but assimilate yourself into the culture. You don't want your son to speak a funny English as you speak. You want him to be a real American. So you would send him to a Jewish school instead to a public school? That's almost an epicursus for many of the immigrants, even the Orthodox ones. So you have to work here both against the questions of physical resources, but also against the tide of the need to assimilate. You have to prove and to promise to these parents that it would be a Jewish day school, Jewish observant, where the students will be steeped deeply into Jewish area, into the Jewish studies, but it would not be on the expense of their secular studies and their ability to become full citizens of the American society. Now again, for us sitting 100 years later, of course. I mean, I just heard someone, maybe you know, he's not a direct descendant of Rav Soloveitchik, but he's a descendant of his brother, Rav Aaron Soloveitchik. There is now Rav Meir Soloveitchik. He is the Rav of the Portuguese synagogue in New York, if I remember correctly, and he's a very strong American speaking rabbi. Now, again, I not have to say that I subscribe to everything that he preaches or that he says. I mean, I'm a Zionist, but he's also, by the way, but he's very American Zionist, which is excellent. I just heard him saying in a certain convention, he said that he believes that the modern Orthodox Jewish schools in America are preparing they are building the students to be better citizens of the I don't speak about Jewish, Americans than what the public school are doing. And he said it with me. He believes that with a very strong conviction. He says, what we give in terms of classical study of American history is richer than what is being given in the equivalent public school. That's an amazing statement. Even if it is not factually true regarding all the modern Orthodox schools, even just that someone is saying that, so you understand that nowadays we stand in a very different culture. And we saw that it is possible for high prices, very high prices, but it is possible. But he had to prove to these parents that they would send their children to this social experience and that it would work. And that's where he established Maimonides. That is the Yeshivat HaRambam, as it was called in Hebrew. In English, it was called Maimonides. And he put himself completely into the establishment of... that was in Boston, yeah. We speak only, in this lecture, as Hashem today, we speak only about Boston. We would not speak about YU, maybe in only one sentence. He put himself, his wife, Dr. Tonya Soloveitchik, who, as we remember, had a PhD for education. She was a co-founder and then the menahelet of the school. And what he wanted to prove is that Jewish education, meaning you don't have to see the school only as a way to protect yourself from the American open society, which in some Orthodox circles, that's the way they also spoke about day schools, but that was in order for them not to, the children should not, chas v'chaila, walk into a public school. He says, no, it's not because of our fear for American society, it's because of our dream that we can here establish an Orthodox Jew, an observant. He would less speak about this. Modern Orthodox was not the term that he necessarily was advocating for, but a Shomer Mitzvot, a Shomer Torah Jew, which not only that he is not afraid of anything, but he is spreading the light of Torah everywhere. And we can build it here in the Treife Medina, right, in this place which now seems like a desert of Torah. And he was... as we know, he was extremely successful in this mission. Now, the school had many innovations that were not simple for Orthodox Jews to accept, just a few of them. So a part of just leaving the public school sphere to itself, that was a huge step. And a part of taking $400 tuition a year. Now, before you just remember the inflation. That's right. That's a lot. It's about a quarter of the average income at the time. It's like the price, I made a few checks. It's like the price of about a half new Ford car at the time. Now, again, just to make the comparison, is someone here knows what is the price for Maimonides school nowadays for a 12-year-old child? 41. For 2027, if someone here is planning on sending a child, that is, I mean, according to the internet site, it's $41,000. If you have 3 children, I don't know, what do you do? That's for child, yeah, per child. But to be just to be honest, it's the highest price, means between grades 9 and 12. So if you send to middle school, it's only 35. So you can rest assured.
It was just the day school was.
It's including, I don't know. Does it include lunch? I have no idea.
No.
No, it's not. It doesn't include anything. No buses, no lunch, no.
No, busing was extra. Westchester Day School was affiliated with Maimonides, so the headmaster of Westchester Day School was a Maimonides graduate, and British.
That's British.
Very British. And at the time when my kids went to school there, it was already 18,000, 20,000, going back just a few years.
2, 3.
Well,
yeah. Wow. Yeah. So that's what we spoke about, prices to pay. It's not simple. That's the dedication. Again, we can sometimes maybe feel sorry for the lack of knowledge of these parents that we're sending, but their dedication, their choice to put themselves to take a large sum of what they were earning and hardly earning. We don't speak necessarily about people that were lawyers or accountants. We speak about immigrants that were earning their money the hard way.
But they didn't go.
That's it's immediately after the depression. It's the 1930. It's 1937. It's still depression. It's in the Second War. You can say it's Libya. Yeah, and still they were shelling this 400 again. For us, $400 seems like a joke, but it was not a joke at all. Not a joke at all for them. Again, for me, that's an example of how much the Rab was successful in installing into his communities, and again, here communities is not only Boston, of course, it's the whole modern Orthodox world, the importance of chinuch, because it did not exist. That was the first day school, Jewish day school in New England. In other places, though, but in New England, it was the first. So, again, to understand, I'm not speaking about small chederim, about a modern school that is equipping its students to become, as I said, full citizens in the American society.
Well, that was the difference between the day school and the yeshiva, which was, the day school was modern.
It was modern, yeah.
And yeshiva
Was more, yeah. Sometimes they just call it different names, but yeah, you're right. You are absolutely right. So that's the first innovation, just having a day school with such a high price to pay. The second innovation was that it was co-ed. There were boys and girls learning in the same classrooms. Now, there is a huge debate among the students of Rav Soloveitchik. I'm in no position, obviously, to make any call on that. But was that only out of necessity, or was that an ideological decision? Gabi Spivak gave me this nice sefer called An American Orthodox Dreamer. It's from Rabbi Yosef Faber, and it's about the Maimonides school and the controversies around it and the ideology of Rav Soloveitchik. I didn't read the whole thing cover to cover, but I read some of it. Obviously, extremely interesting. Extremely interesting. Also a beautiful picture of the Rab, I must say. So so he's having the different opinions. I shouldn't say that I'm even saying it as an assumption about what Rav thought, because I never met him, I didn't meet him, I didn't hear enough from him. My hunch, complete hunch, would be that he saw teaching Talmud to girls was for him something that is not a necessity, but an ideology. That he thought is lechatchila, that must be done, that in the modern world, you must teach girls to think in broad ways about Yahadut. Because it is one thing when women were not part of the workforce, they were not trained in secular knowledge, as was in Europe for hundreds of years. So you also didn't need a very deep Jewish education. But it is an absurd that a woman that is a CEO of a company, right, that she or a professor in university, and she is working all day with her brain, with her mind, and she's an expert in her field, but in Yahadut, she would be like a second grader or a third grader. That is inconsistent with what we believe is the goal of human life, both for men and women, that is to serve God. So that's, he also spoke, meaning the words I'm saying now are things that also are being heard. He didn't write anywhere, to my knowledge, directly to this topic. So everything is just things that people heard from him. And Rav Soloveitchik was a big man with many students. And as many rabbis do, he spoke to each student according to his level and according to his understanding. So sometimes when these students are then coming out and they are saying what they heard from Rav Soloveitchik, you find contradictions. But it's not really contradictions. It's just different teachings according to what each student needed. So there are different statements here. Yes?
What is the whole co-ed thing, would that not be an influence from his wife as well? Who was very involved in the school and who had a degree of education?
For sure. But if yes, then what would it mean about his own positions? That would be, I don't know. Again, he is going much, much deeper into that. So if someone is interested, then that is, you can order it from Amazon. I don't have any shares, so that's, but you can read it inside. The subtitle is Rabbi Joseph B. Soloveitchik and Boston's Maimonides School, an American Orthodox dreamer. So you can use a whole chapter, long chapter, giving Rav Schechter's position and Rav this position and Rav that position. Okay, I would not say that I'm knowing better than these people that knew Rav Soloveitchik throughout half of their life. So about teaching Talmud, that seems to be a lechatchila thing. If he would have thought that he would be able to teach Talmud to girls in separate classrooms, would he go for that? That I feel is an open question. Because it is not clear, it may be that he felt, I'm sure that was the reality. If the classes would be separated, the level of Talmud for girls would not be the same. Because it would be difficult to find the right teachers, etc. If the classrooms are mixed, then it is easier to give the proper education as he believed should be given also to girls. But did he thought that even if you can separate, you should separate? You shouldn't separate. It should be co-ed. That's I don't know. That's for me. It's not a simple question to answer. Okay.
Ages of
High school. Yeah. So yeah. So no, but it began for everything from nursery into high school. But when I speak about co-ed education, I speak even about high school. That's what I meant to say. Yes, we know that in YU, when there was even an attempt and suggestion that maybe girls would somehow be enrolled into classes of Talmud, he was vehemently opposed. So what to make out of all of this mixture? I am leaving it to you. And again, if you want to read, he has his own position. He was a teacher in Maimonides, and he thinks basically everything that was done there is the lechatchila of what the Rav wanted. But he gives very honestly, he gives different positions. Also, is the whole history of the establishment of the school. So again, if you are interested, I think that's a wonderful source. In 1939, he is part of the foundation of Agudat Israel in the United States. And he is sitting on the Moetzet of Gdolei Torah, the first Moetzet in the United States. He is a sitting member, which again is maybe shocking when we think about what the future would hold. However, also in 1939, as we know, World War II breaks, and he begins to understand that something was very wrong in the views of Agudat Israel and the Rabbanim of the Aguda in Europe. That many times, they didn't push their members hard enough to go out of Europe in time. I'm trying to say in the most sensitive way. They didn't push their members hard enough in order to go out of Europe, and sometimes even did the opposite. And that he was involved in attempts of trying to save European Jewry. He was part of Vada Hatzalah in the United States. There was the rabbis demonstration. There's a nice word. In 1943, I think, there was a Tza'adat HaRabbanim. The rabbis walk in Washington, which was in order to protest, in order to maybe push the United States government into an action which, unfortunately, as we know, was not taken. Even simple things such as bombing the railroads, very simple things. The planes were already there, and for different reasons, the president didn't think that's the right thing to do. And he felt blame. Many years later, in 1956, look at source Gimel. That's from a lecture he gave for the 8th Independence Day of Medinat Israel. So 1956. Let us be honest, source Gimel. During the terrible Holocaust, when European Jewry was systematically destroyed in gas chambers and crematoria, the American Jewish community did not rise to the occasion and did not acquit itself as a community with the collective conscience of shared fate, shared suffering, and shared action with which it should have been expected to act. We did not properly sense the suffering of the nation and we did precious little to save our unfortunate brethren. It is hard to know what we could have. Yeah, no. Yeah, what we could have accomplished had we been more active. I personally think we could have saved many. Now, this is a sentence to think about it for me. What does it mean for someone walking along with this feeling? Because I think that the easiest way is to say, no, anyhow, there was nothing. So we'd have a few more demonstrations. Nothing would have moved Roosevelt into doing anything that would have saved the Jews. But that's not how he saw it. He felt that if he would have only tried a little more. Now, here you remember, we spoke about the education he received from his father, that with the proper willpower, everything can be achieved. So every failure is a failure, almost every failure is a moral failure. And I think that's how he translated this failure of the American Jewish community, which he was not only a part of, he was a leader of, in saving their brothers in Europe. No doubt, however, if we had properly felt the pain of our brothers, that we raised our voices and shaken words, that Roosevelt issued a sharp warning of protest accompanied by action, we would have been able to significantly slow the process of mass destruction. We witnessed the most terrible tragedy in our history, and we were silent. I shall not now dwell on the particulars. It is an extremely painful chapter. We all sin by our silence in the face of murder of millions. Do we not all stand before God's seat of judgment, charged with the grievous sin of you shall not stand idly by the blood of your neighbor? לא תעמוד על דם רעך? Especially when the sin applies not only to one individual, but to millions? When I say we, I mean all of us, including myself, the members of rabbinic and lay organizations, both Orthodox and secular, and Jewish political organizations of all persuasions. Your leaders, כולכם ניצבים היום. Do you know why we were so indifferent? I think it is because our sense of nationhood was damaged. We did not grasp the notion of the experience of shared fate. It's what he called Brit Goral, the covenant of shared fate, and the essence of peoplehood. So he identified the failure not as a practical failure. If we would have just demonstrated here and not there, we would just have went to this petition or that petition. No, he said it was a moral failure. And specifically, what was the moral failure? The sense that we are all one united nation. So this feeling led him to understand that being part of the Aguda, while the Aguda is called Aguda, means united, obviously the Aguda stands for the separation of the Orthodox Jews from the rest of the Jewish nation. He felt that that is a position that caused damage. And the proper position was the position of the Mizrachi. Now again, he says everyone is to be blamed. No one acted good enough, strong enough. However, the right moral position was that of the Mizrachi, because they understood that the nation is one, and that had pushed them into the attempt to establish a safe haven in Eretz Israel. Now, in the end, it didn't succeed for 6 million, for many reasons. But at least they were in the right track, and those that obeyed, those that listened, that heeded to the warnings and went to Eretz Israel, were saved. So again, another drasha, this time from 1962. It was published in a very famous sefer of the Rav called, it was in the beginning, it was in Yiddish, so it's a Fir Drasha. I mean, 5 drashot, 5 sermons. This is the English version. Again, the original was given in Yiddish. In the controversy between Joseph and of yore and his brother thousands of years ago. Again, so now it takes the issue with Yosef and the Achim, and of course Yosef is both, he means Rabbi Joseph, he means the Mizrachi, Rabbi Joseph Reins, but more than that, Yosef is of course Yosef Rav Soloveitchik. He says, God decided in accord with Joseph's interpretation of the historical process. In our days, the creator of the universe similarly decided that the law, halacha, will be as the Joseph of 1562. This is Tafrei Samech Bet. That is the year that the Mizrachi was established. Had predicted in accord with the view of him with little faith in the future of East European Jewry and who dreamed of another land and another conditions, such as Yosef, from Yosef and his brothers in the Torah, knew that we cannot stay in Canaan. We have to go to Mitzrayim because there is a gzera that we would be slaves in other land. So we should prepare ourselves. And the brothers said, no, we need to focus where we are. So the Mizrachi said, Europe seems to be glorious, Jewish institution, galore, everything beautiful, Torah. We must move, we must go to Eretz Israel. And the brothers detached themselves. They threw Yosef into the pit. They banned the Mizrachi. Said that was a mistake. Just as history had proven, and history is God's story, just as history has proven that Yosef was right and not his brothers, because in the end they all were dependent on him, in the same way, history has proven that the Mizrachi was right, that the Zionists were right. Because without, let's continue, I would like to ask a simple question. What would the yeshivot and Torah scholar, even those that were rescued from the Holocaust, these burning embers taken from the fire, have done if the Joseph of 1560, of the Mizrachi, had not trod a path for them in the land of Israel, had not made possible the transplanting of the tree of life of Lithuania and other lands in the Holy Land. Let's imagine that there was no Mizrachi. So no Eretz Israel, no religious Zionism in Eretz Israel. Even these Edim Utzalim Mesh, right, these embers from the fire, as he calls them, that after the Holocaust, where would they have gone? They all came here and were supported here by the Mizrachi here supported even those that were very far from his ideology. Because we understood that we need to support giants of Torah, regardless of their color and stripe. But what would have happened if that was not in the case? Then he says about himself, that's a very revealing passage. I was not born into a Zionist household. That's, again, very mildly. Reb Chaim of Soloveitchik was one of the most fiercing oppositioners of Zionism. I was not born into a Zionist household. My parents' ancestors, my father's house, my teachers and colleagues were far from the Mizrachi religious Zionist. They too held, why meddle in the secrets of the merciful one? Just sit in Europe and wait for the Mashiach. My links with the Mizrachi grew gradually. I had my doubts about the validity of the Mizrachi approach. If I now identify with the Mizrachi against my family tradition, for someone like him saying I'm going against my family tradition, that's a very difficult sentence. It is only because, as previously clarified, I feel that the divine providence ruled like Yosef and against his brothers, that he, meaning God, employs secular Jews as instruments to bring the fruition his great plans regarding the lands of Israel. I also believe that there would be no place for Torah in Israel today were it not for the Mizrachi. And then he says again about himself, I built an altar upon which I sacrificed sleepless nights. He describes his decision to go from the Aguda to the Mizrachi. And he was a leader, he was on the Moatzah, he was not just a card member carrying. He sacrificed sleepless nights, doubts, reservations. Regardless the years of the Italian Holocaust, the establishment of the State of Israel, and the accomplishments of the Mizrachi in the land of Israel convinced me of the correctness of our movement's path. And in 1943, he abandons Aguda and he goes to the Mizrachi. In 1946, he becomes the president of the Mizrachi. I highly recommend reading his Kol Dodi Dofek, the knocking of my beloveds, the voice of my beloved knocks. And there he describes 6 dimensions in which the establishment of the State of Israel is theologically significant. Yes.
Why did he try to be the rabbi of people?
I don't think he was an anti-Zionist at that point, but he was an a-Zionist. And again, we have to remember that Tel Aviv was not ruled by the Zionists, it was ruled by the British. So I figured, I guess, that he would be able to go between the lines, but it didn't help him. It's irony of fate that part of the reason why he was not chosen, why he was not elected, was because he was not a member of the Mizrachi. While later he became the president of the Mizrachi in the United States. Now, we have to understand, although he was converted to the Mizrachi, that doesn't mean that he became Rav Kook. He did not believe in the messianic value of the state, and he didn't necessarily see it as part of redemption. He said but it's a smile that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us, and we have to accept it, and we have to be thankful for it. We have to preserve it. We have to work hard in order to have it. Im Yirtzeh Hashem, I hope to speak about that next week. That would be a good question to end with a question. So yeah, why not only did it live into it, he didn't even visit it. All of these years, from 1935 to his Petira in 1986, yeah, I think. So all of these years, he never visited even one day. So that's even that he had a daughter here. So that's a question that we would have to ask. I don't say that we have to answer because I don't have an answer, but I can read with you some answers that were given. That we'll do Be'ezrat Hashem next week. But also, with everything very important, we spoke about his Boston activity. We spoke about his Zionism. We didn't speak about what is the jewel in the crown of Rav Soloveitchik, is of course him becoming the Rosh Yeshiva of Ritz, of Rabbi Yeshivat Yitzchak Elchanan, of the Y Yeshiva University. And that also happened during the war, but that would have to wait for Be'ezrat Hashem next week. Thank you so much for joining us.
Okay, thank you very much. Toda Rabba.